Welcome to the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, where it's time for podcast picks with Jim the Podcast Sherpa. You'll get to hear about podcast recommendations for your podcast playlist, along with occasional interviews with other podcasters and video hosts. Now waiting for you is your host, Jim the Podcast Sherpa. He's just like you imagined. But don't worry. We'll make it up to you somehow.
It's a mini episode this week on Podcast Picks with Jim the Podcast Sherpa. We're featuring some Sherpa samples along with some news about what's coming up. And despite the rumors you might have heard, the Sherpa is not being replaced with artificial intelligence. That's because he doesn't have any actual intelligence to replace.
Welcome to the Sherpa's Podcast Picks. It's the podcast about, podcasts. And now, coming to you from Mount Podcastia, here's your host, who wonders what's on your podcast playlist, Jim the Podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, rebels of the Sherpa-lution, and welcome to Podcast Picks with me, Jim the Podcast Sherpa, coming to you from Sherpa-lu Studios here in the Sherpa Chalet, high atop Mount Podcastia, where I overlook the millions and millions of podcasts that are out there. Hello there. This is a mini episode, and I know some of you are so excited it's a mini episode, and usually when it is a mini episode, that means we will just be featuring some Sherpa samples. And for those of you who are new to the show, Sherpa Samples is when I check out some of the podcasts that are out there on the podcast charts and just chat a little about them with you. And maybe there might be something that you might want to add to your podcast playlist. That's simple. So a little bit of background before I actually get started. I changed my podcast player. I know that you're probably thinking, why is he talking about this? Well, usually when I use a podcast app, I make sure that there's something with charts on it. So I can talk about the different podcasts that are on there and sample the shows that are there. And then that's what the show becomes, like this one. So the one that I had was really nice. It was unfortunately starting to take up a lot of space on my phone. So I went looking around and I tried another one and I kept it for a couple of weeks. It worked pretty good. The ads I felt were really intrusive. So lots of times if I had to go back to something, an ad would pop up and I'd have to wait like 20, 30 seconds to access a show. And I just wanted to maybe just look at something for a quick second. So it got a little annoying after a while, as you can imagine. And also, if some of you who use Android phones, maybe you use Android Auto when you're driving, as I do. And it was crashing a lot on Android Auto, which was kind of unfortunate. It was making Android Auto constantly reboot, as opposed to the previous podcast player, which did not do that. So right now I'm currently experimenting with another player, one with podcast charts, of course. I found 10 to listen to, and I wanted to give you a little feedback about these podcasts, and maybe it's something that you might be interested in. So why don't we get started with Sherpa Samples? Okay, so on to Sherpa Samples. In the time between when I recorded the intro and I recorded this segment, I've actually changed my podcast player again. I am not joking. But these are the 10 podcasts that I checked out on on 2 podcast players ago. But I just wanted to make sure that we wanted to get some shows to check out. And it's interesting because the podcast app that I used, I went down the chart. I always start at the top and work my way down and, try not to do repeats, but discuss ones that I haven't discussed before. And I think most of the time I'm pretty good with not repeating. I'm sure that I've said a couple of them twice, but maybe they were interesting twice, so who knows? So here are the 10 that I've checked out. And it's interesting. It just really kind of worked out this way. But out of the 10 podcasts, 9 of them are business-related, money-related, and self-help related. And it's funny, there's kind of a sameness to these types of podcasts. And I'm not knocking them or anything like that because it really does make sense, though. Think about it. You want to start a business, right? And you want to do well with the business. Then you want to make money with that business, of course. And you want to invest that money smartly. Smartly? Yeah, smartly. Why not? And in doing so, you want to feel better about yourself. You don't want to live in a world of stress. So you want to know how to make yourself a better person. So a lot of these topics of these podcasts tend to intersect, which I guess makes sense, right? I mean, if you want to do it right, then you got to do it right. Write that down, rebels. I know I'm a man of deep philosophy. So, and I've noticed like these podcasts are usually hosted by people who are authors or public speakers. Very often they've done TED Talks, serial entrepreneurs. I hate that word. And why do I hate that word? Because to me, it sounds like a person who can't hold down a job. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm done with that one, so now I'm doing this one. And then when I'm done with this one, I'm going to move on to the next one. What about like a multi-field leader? Isn't that a nicer way to put things, right? It makes you sound less like a person who's going to give up on a job. I like that. Commitment. Commitment, rebels. Okay. So let's talk about some of the podcasts that we checked out. There was Proven, and that is hosted by a guy named Charles Schwartz. The LevelUP podcast. And they had a guest named Paul Alex discussing what you can do with passive income, and Real AF with Andy Frisella, which I understand is pretty popular. AF, get it? Andy Frisella? You weren't thinking the other thing. But there is a lot of cursing in that one. But it was really weird because LevelUP podcast and Real AF, there was so much, dude, bro. I think if you were playing a drinking game, for every time they said the word dude or bro, you would probably be suffering from alcohol poisoning at that point. And you probably wouldn't even be able to get through the episode because you'd be so inebriated. But moving on anyway, I guess they know their audience. So all the dudes and the bros, they're checking out those podcasts. Habits and Hustle, and that is a podcast where successful people are interviewed. And the interview that I checked out was with trainer Shaun T. Do you guys know Shaun T? Yeah. Insanity, Hip Hop Abs. What else? The Dig Deeper and Dig In, which is his new program. I got to check that out. I like Shaun T. I think probably he does one of the best aerobic workouts if you follow the Beachbody world. Not that I'm like, built like, I don't know. I'm not built like Superman, trust me, but I definitely enjoy his programs. Young and Profiting with Halal Taha. If you've seen this one, you kind of see that YAP in capital letters. That's what the Young and Profiting is. And again, it's an entrepreneur podcast. No surprise there. And The Vault Unlocked, which is hosted by Kayvon K. And that had to do with winning people over within like the first 10 seconds of your presentation. So little things like that. And I guess while, you're talking about like business life skills, there's another one called Creating Confidence with Heather Monaghan. And Heather Monaghan, I was reading up on, again, also an author, an entrepreneur. She founded a company called Bosses and Heels, if I'm not mistaken. And she talks with a lot of people about elements of the business world as well. Then there is the Money Mondays, which is hosted by a guy named Dan Fleischman. And Dan is also, I believe, an author. And normally it's probably a lot of finance stuff. He was speaking with an ex-Marine who actually had some sort of camp that was used for men and women to build up their confidence and, and their abilities as men and women. Really interesting stuff. Very, very different. Chief Change Officer, that is a podcast that is hosted by Vince Chen. Vince is a lady. The episode I caught was, I guess, a part of a 3-part interview with a business owner named Waverly Deutsch. And they really break down the success in her business and what things worked for her. I noticed in the episode that I was listening to, the guest does a lot of the talking and is really kind of telling their story. And Vince occasionally chimes in with questions. But a lot of it is just the guest speaking, which is okay, really, because when you listen to a TED Talk, that's what it is, right? It's one person speaking. And lastly, this was not a business, money, feel-good podcast. This was true crime. There's always a true crime podcast. So this was created by Dateline, and that means you got to hear the dulcet tones of Keith Morrison doing the narration. And the podcast is called Something About Cari, and it was about a woman named Cari Farver who went missing. And she was supposed to show at a family wedding with her son, but she never appeared. But I mean, they also kind of foreshadowed, I guess, in the beginning about another woman, not Cari, getting killed in a park. So we have to find out in this podcast what exactly she has to do with all of this. And, if it's Dateline, they do such really good stories. So that's one to check out if you are a true crime fan. There's always something for the true crime fans that are out there. So those are your 10. And I want you to find a good job, make some good money, feel good about yourself, check out the true crime, and head on into the outro.
Let's get back to the Sherpa.
Sorry about that.
So for those of you who are new to the show, normally at this point I would be thanking my guest, but I'm the guest, so I'm thanking myself. I'll listen to this. I'm patting myself on the back. Okay, I guess that's the closest I can do. But thanks for coming on the show, Sherpa. You're quite welcome, Sherpa. I don't know. Let's move along here, shall we? I just wanted to let you know that if you are listening to this in real time, the week of Christmas and the week of New Year's will be full of Sherpa Selects. And what are Sherpa Selects, you may ask? Those are my favorite episodes from the first 7 seasons that I've got all prettied up, and they're going to be featured on my YouTube channel. And you get to hear them if you miss them the first time around, and they'll sound a lot nicer. So you won't be hearing any new material those weeks, either on Wednesday or Saturday. But please check them out. There's definitely 4 good interviews. On the 24th, it'll be an encore interview with Shannon Wilson. And on the 31st, it will be an encore interview with Billy Van Zandt, who is an actor and a writer and a playwright as well. If you've ever heard of the play Love, Sex, and the IRS, he wrote that with his partner. That's right. And he wrote a really good book a few years ago, and that's why he popped on the podcast. We talked about it, and it is a really fascinating and very funny book. I think you'll enjoy really all of those interviews that are going to be on those weeks. So don't forget about me. I'll still be here. And of course, if you're subscribing on your podcast apps, you will see new episodes the following week. I hope. But talking about what's coming up, I've got 2 that are currently in the works. One, unfortunately, had to be rescheduled. And that may be the next interview that you hear. Or there was another interview that I have scheduled, which if you hear this one, Rebels, you're going to be amazed. And not with me, but over the fact that this person is a guest on my podcast. And the topic that gets discussed is going to be pretty powerful and almost shocking, I think, for a lot of people, especially with what you may be used to hearing from this podcast the last 7 years. But I would implore you to check the show out. It's going to be a very powerful episode. I can guarantee you that. I'm not going to say who the guest is because obviously we haven't had the interview yet, and sometimes things go wrong and we have to reschedule that one as well. But we will find out. But you will know if and when that guest will be on the show. But trust me, it's definitely one you're going to want to check out. So I guess that will do it for me. If you want to follow me on social media, Sherpalution is the word. Instagram, TikTok, Threads, YouTube, it's all there. Just me. And also, you can hear this show on podcast apps everywhere or on my website, which is on the show notes if you wanted to know what that link is, or on the YouTube channel, which is at Sherpalution, and also on open.video. And all my videos are there too. Well, there's no video. It's just audio. You're welcome. I know. Trust me. You don't want to see this face. All right. That's going to do it for me. I guess I will be back next week with the show one way or the other. And then we'll be taking a little break and coming back strong in 2026. And I hope to see you there. And if you can, spread the word about the show. I'm sure people may want to hear about some of the things that are going on here. We've got this going on. We've got the Sherpa screening room. We've got true crime screening room. And who knows what else may come up in the near future. I guess we'll find out. But until then, I say to you, Viva la Sherpalution.
Thanks for listening to the Sherpa's Podcast Picks. The podcast is now over. Please disperse and tell everyone about us. As long as they don't put us back in jail. Viva la Sherpalution!